The alarm screamed through the metal walls of Orbital Station. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The sound was loud enough to wake the dead, and Ho was already running before his eyes fully opened. He grabbed his rifle from the wall and pushed through the door of his small room. Other soldiers were running too. Their boots made thunder on the floor. Nobody spoke. They all knew what the alarm meant. They had come. Ho reached the command deck in less than 2 minutes. Commander stood at the center console, his old face hard as stone. The main screen showed what everyone feared. Dozens of warships hung in the black space outside the station. They were huge and dark, shaped like blades cutting through the stars. They brought a fleet, Commander said. His voice was calm, but Ho could see his hands shaking. This is not a raid. This is an invasion. Ho moved to his station. His fingers flew across the controls. Shields are holding at 60%. We lost power in the lower sectors during the first strike. How long can we hold? Asked. Ho did not answer right away. He looked at the numbers on his screen. He looked at the size of the enemy fleet. Then he met his commander's eyes. Maybe 2 hours, maybe less. Nodded slowly. He had fought for 30 years. He knew what those numbers meant. Begin evacuation of all civilians. Get them to the escape pods. We hold the line until they are gone. Ho saluted and ran. The next hour was chaos. Ho led his squad through the burning corridors of the station. They fought the soldiers who had already broken through the outer walls. The aliens were tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes like black glass. They moved fast and they did not feel pain the way humans did. But humans were stubborn. Ho's squad held every corner, every doorway. They bought time with their blood. During a brief moment of quiet, Ho's radio crackled. A voice came through and his heart stopped. Ho, can you hear me? It was Park. Her voice was tight with fear, but she was trying to stay calm. She always tried to stay calm. That was who she was. Where are you? Ho pressed himself against a wall, checking the corridor for enemies. Medical Bay 7 is with me. We were helping the wounded when they cut off our section. The doors are sealed. We cannot get to the escape pods. Ho closed his eyes for 1 second, just 1 second. Then he opened them again. Stay there, I am coming. He turned to his squad. 5 soldiers looked back at him. They were tired and bloody, but they stood ready. I need to get to Medical Bay 7, he said. There are people trapped there. I am not ordering anyone to come with me. The path will be dangerous. All 5 soldiers stepped forward. Private Bai, the youngest of them, smiled through the dirt on her face. You think we would let you go alone, Lieutenant? What kind of soldiers would we be? Ho felt something warm in his chest. Pride, gratitude. He nodded once. Let us move. The path to Medical Bay 7 was a nightmare. Soldiers filled the corridors. Ho and his squad fought through them step by step. They lost Private Sung at the first junction. A blade took him before anyone could react. They lost Corporal 1 at the second. By the time they reached the medical bay, only 3 of them remained. Ho, Private Bai, and Sergeant Wu Jin. Their ammunition was almost gone. Their bodies were covered in cuts and burns. But they reached the door. Ho forced it open with his hands, using all his strength. The metal screamed as it bent. On the other side, he saw them. Park stood in front of her younger sister, Park, held a metal pipe like a weapon, was behind her treating a wounded civilian on the floor. Around them were a dozen other people. Engineers, doctors, children, all trapped. When saw Ho, her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She never cried. You came. I always come, Ho said. Now move, we need to reach the escape pods. They ran together through the dying station. Ho led the way. Bai and Wu Jin guarded the sides and helped the wounded and the children. The station shook around them. Explosions echoed from every direction. They were almost at the pod bay when the ceiling collapsed. Ho woke to darkness and pain. His head was bleeding. His legs were trapped under metal. He could hear voices, but they sounded far away. Then light appeared, harsh, cold light, and figures stepped through the smoke. Soldiers, a dozen of them. They pulled Ho from the rubble. They grabbed and they killed Bai and Wu Jin before either could raise their weapons. Ho screamed, he fought. He tried to break free, but his body was too broken and there were too many of them. The commander looked at the three humans with cold interest. These three, alive, the king will want to see them. They were dragged through the ruined station, through halls filled with human bodies and victory. They were thrown into a shuttle that flew toward the largest warship in the fleet. Ho could not see much from where he lay on the cold floor, but he could feel his hand near his. He could hear crying softly beside him. He reached out and took both their hands. "I am here," he whispered. "I am still here." The shuttle docked with the flagship. The doors opened to reveal a hall of black stone and silver light. Soldiers lined the walls like statues. At the far end sat a throne, and on that throne sat a figure that made Ho's blood run cold. King of the Empire. The king was taller than any Ho had seen. His skin was pale gray, almost white. His eyes were like holes into nothing. He wore armor made of some dark metal that seemed to drink the light. And he was smiling. "Bring them closer," the king said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. That made it worse. The soldiers dragged Ho, and to the foot of the throne. They were forced to their knees. King leaned forward. He studied them the way a scientist might study insects. "Humans," he said, "I have heard so much about your kind, your strange emotions, your foolish attachments." He looked at how Ho still held the sister's hands. "Your love." He said the last word like it was a disease. Ho met the king's eyes. He did not look away. "What do you want from us?" King's smile grew wider. "I want to understand you. I want to see what makes humans so interesting." He gestured to his guards. "Take the females to separate chambers. I have a game I wish to play with this one." The guards moved forward. They pulled to the left, to the right. The sisters screamed. They reached for each other, for Ho, but they could not hold on. Ho watched them disappear through different doors. He watched the doors close. He heard their voices fade. Then he was alone with the king. Stood from his throne. He walked down the steps until he stood directly in front of Ho. He was so tall that Ho had to look up to see his face. "Tomorrow," the king said, "I will give you a choice, and that choice will teach me everything I need to know about humanity." He turned and walked away, leaving Ho kneeling on the cold stone floor. Alone, broken, but not beat. Not yet. Ho did not sleep that night. He sat in his cell and stared at the wall. The cell was small and cold. The walls were made of the same black stone as the throne room. There was no bed, no blanket, nothing. Just him and the darkness. His body hurt everywhere. The cuts on his arms had stopped bleeding, but they burned like fire. His ribs might be broken. Every breath was a knife in his chest. But he did not care about the pain. He only thought about and. Were they hurt? Were they scared? Of course they were scared. They were prisoners on an alien ship waiting to die. Anyone would be scared. But Ho knew them. He had known them his whole life. He knew would be planning. Her mind never stopped working. She would be looking at the walls, the doors, the guards. She would be searching for a way out. And sweet, she would be worried about others, not herself. If there were wounded prisoners nearby, she would try to help them. That was who she was. Even in the darkest moment, she would find a way to bring light. Ho remembered the day he first met them. He was 8 years old, alone in the streets of New Colony. His parents had died in a mining accident. He had no family, no food, no home. He was just a hungry boy with dirt on his face. Then Mrs. Park found him. She was a kind woman with gentle eyes. She took his hand and brought him to her small home. She fed him rice and soup. She gave him a blanket, and she introduced him to her daughters. Was 10, already serious and smart. Was 6, full of laughter and joy. They looked at Ho with curious eyes. "This is Ho," Mrs. Park said. "He will be staying with us." "For how long?" asked. Mrs. Park smiled. "For as long as he needs." That night crawled into his blanket and held his hand. "Do not be scared," she whispered. "You are family now." 20 years later, those words still lived in his heart. The cell door opened with a loud noise. Light poured in, and Ho had to cover his eyes. 2 guards grabbed his arms and pulled him up. "The king calls for you," one of them said. They dragged him through long hallways. Others watched them pass. Some looked curious, some looked bored. None of them showed mercy. The throne room was even larger than Ho remembered. Or maybe he just felt smaller. King sat on his throne, looking down at the world like a god. Around him stood dozens of nobles. They wore fine clothes and cruel smiles. This was entertainment for them. And at the foot of the throne, on their knees, were Ho's heart jumped when he saw them. They were alive. They looked tired and afraid, but they were alive. When they saw him, his eyes grew sharp with worry, called out his name. "Ho!" The guards threw him to his knees beside them. For one moment they were close enough to touch. Ho looked at each of them. He tried to say with his eyes what he could not say with words. "I am here, we will survive this, I promise." King stood from his throne. He moved slowly, like he had all the time in the world. In his hand he held a blade. It was long and curved, made of silver metal that caught the light. "I have studied your species for many years," the king said. His voice filled the room. "You are weak in body, slow in mind. Your technology is primitive, and yet you have survived longer than any other species we have conquered." He walked down the steps. His eyes never left Ho. "I asked myself why, what is different about humans, and then I found the answer," he smiled. "Love." He said the word like it was poison. "You form attachments, deep, foolish attachments. You will die for each other. You will suffer for each other. You call it love, but I call it a chain. It makes you weak." He stopped in front of Ho. He pointed the blade at "These 2 females, they are important to you, yes?" Ho did not answer. His jaw was tight. "You do not need to speak. I can see it in your eyes." The king laughed softly. "So here is my game, human, my gift to you." He raised the blade high so everyone could see it. "I will kill one of these females. You will choose which one lives and which one dies. If you refuse to choose, I will kill them both." He lowered the blade until it pointed at Ho's heart. "The choice is yours." The room went silent. Even the nobles stopped smiling. They leaned forward, hungry to see what would happen. Spoke first. Her voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. "Ho, listen to me. She is younger. She has more years ahead of her. Save her." "No," grabbed Ho's arm. Her face was wet with tears. "No, Ho, please save. She is smarter than me. She can help humanity. She is more important. Please save her." "Stop it," said. "Do not argue. This is my choice too. I want you to live." "And I want you to live." His voice broke. "I cannot lose you. I cannot." The sisters looked at each other. They were both crying now. They both wanted to save the other. They both wanted to die for the other. And Ho was trapped between them. King watched with great interest. "Beautiful," he whispered. "This is what I wanted to see, the pain, the impossible choice, the chains of love tightening around your hearts." Ho's mind raced. There had to be a way. There was always a way, he just needed to find it. He needed time. "Let me take their place," he said. "Kill me instead, let them both live." The king shook his head. "That is not the game, human. I am not interested in simple sacrifice. I want to see you break. I want to see you choose one life over another. I want to see love become a weapon against itself." "There must be something else," Ho said. "Something you want. I will give you anything." "I have everything I want." The king turned to his guards. "Take him back to his cell. He has until the next cycle to decide. When the time ends, I will have my answer, one way or another." The guards grabbed Ho. He struggled, but there were too many of them. They pulled him away from it. He could hear the sisters calling his name. He could see their faces growing smaller as the distance grew. Then the doors closed, and he saw nothing at all. They threw him back into his cell. The door slammed shut. Darkness returned. Ho fell to his knees. His breathing was fast and shallow. His heart was beating so hard it hurt. Choose a sister. Choose who lives. Choose who dies. How could he make that choice? Who had taught him to read and write? Who had stayed up with him during his nightmares? Who had helped him become the man he was today? Or Sweet, who found joy in everything? Who had held his hand on that first night and called him family? Who had become a medic because she could not stand to see anyone in pain? He loved them both. They were his sisters in every way that mattered. To choose, one was to kill the other with his own words. Ho stood up slowly. He walked to the wall and pressed his hands against the cold stone. Then he started hitting it. He hit the wall again and again. His fists bled. His knuckles cracked, but he did not stop. The pain in his hands was easier to feel than the pain in his heart. Finally, when his arms had no strength left, he stopped. He leaned his forehead against the wall. His blood marked the stone like red tears. "There has to be a way," he whispered. "There has to be." And somewhere in the darkness of his mind, a small idea began to form. A desperate, impossible idea, but it was all he had. He would not play the king's game. He would break the game itself. Or he would die trying. The hours passed slowly in the darkness. Ho sat with his back against the wall. His hands had stopped bleeding, but they were swollen and sore. He did not care. He was thinking. He remembered everything he knew about the. They were an old species, older than humans by thousands of years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They were strong and smart and completely without mercy. But they had rules. All old civilizations had rules, and rules could be used. The door of his cell opened. Ho looked up, expecting guards. Instead, he saw a single female. She was tall like all her kind, but her face was different. There was something almost soft in her eyes. She carried a tray with food and water. She set it on the floor near him. "You should eat," she said. "You will need your strength." Ho did not move. "Who are you?" "I am General Myra. I command the king's military forces." She looked at his bloody hands. "You hurt yourself." "The wall hurt itself against my fists." A small smile appeared on Myra's face. It vanished quickly. "The king finds you interesting. That is dangerous. Interesting things catch his attention, and his attention always ends in pain." Ho finally reached for the water. His throat was dry. "Why are you here? To watch me suffer like the others?" Myra was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down across from him. It was strange to see a general sitting on a cell floor. "I have seen this game before," she said. "Many times. The king plays it with every species we conquer. He loves to watch them break." "Does anyone ever win?" "No, some choose one person. Some refuse and lose both. Some try to fight and die immediately. No one has ever found a way out." Ho took a bite of the strange food. It tasted like nothing, but he forced himself to eat. "Then why are you telling me this? To make me give up hope?" Myra's dark eyes studied him. "I do not know why I am telling you. Perhaps because you are different from the others. You have not broken yet. You hit the wall until your hands bled, but you did not cry. You did not beg. I find that curious." "I am human. We are stubborn." "Yes, that is what makes your species dangerous." Myra stood up. "The king does not understand humans. He thinks love makes you weak. He thinks he can use your hearts against you." She paused at the door. "I have watched humans fight for 10 years. I have seen soldiers run into fire to save their friends. I have seen parents die protecting children. I have seen strangers give their lives for strangers." She looked back at him. "That is not weakness. That is something else. Something we do not have a word for." Then she was gone, and the door closed behind her. Far from Ho's cell in another part of the ship, sat alone in her prison. The room was larger than Ho's cell, but still bare. A single window showed the stars outside. His mind never stopped working. Even now, even in this dark hour, she was thinking, planning, searching for escape. She had examined every part of the room. The walls were solid. The door was sealed with technology she could not break. The window was thick glass that would not shatter. But she had found something. A small panel near the floor. It looked like a power connection. If she could open it, maybe she could do something with the wires inside. She worked on it for hours. Her fingers bled from the sharp edges. Finally, she managed to pull it open. Inside was a mess of cables and circuits. Technology was different from human technology, but electricity was electricity everywhere in the universe. Studied the wires. She began to understand how they connected. She could not escape with this, but maybe she could send a signal, a message, something. She thought of the equipment they had taken from her when she was captured. Her engineering tools, her personal communicator. They had thrown everything into a storage container, but her communicator had a special feature, something she had built herself. A hidden emergency beacon that would activate if it received the right signal. If she could trigger that beacon, it would send out a call for help. It would tell any human ship within range where they were. It was a small chance. Maybe no one would hear it. Maybe help would come too late, but it was better than nothing. Began to work. In another cell was not alone. They had put her in a room with other human prisoners. There were about 20 of them, survivors from station. Some were soldiers. Some were civilians. Many were wounded. Had no medical supplies, no tools, nothing. But she was a medic. She could not just sit and watch people suffer. She tore cloth from her own clothes to make bandages. She set broken bones with pieces of metal from the beds. She talked to the scared children and held the hands of the dying. An old woman with gray hair watched her work. "You should rest, child. Save your strength." Shook her head. "I cannot rest while people need help. They will kill us all anyway. What is the point?" Looked at her. Her young face was tired but determined. "The point is that we are still alive right now. Every moment we live is a victory. Every person I help is a light in the darkness." She smiled gently. "My mother used to say that. She said as long as we keep helping each other, we have not lost." The old woman's eyes grew wet. "Your mother was wise." "She was the kindest person I ever knew." His voice became soft. "She died 3 years ago, an attack on our colony, but before she died she made my brother promise something." "Your brother?" "He is not my brother by blood, but he is my brother in my heart. His name is Ho. She made him promise to protect me and my sister, to keep us safe." His hands trembled as she wrapped a bandage around a wounded man's arm. "He has kept that promise for 3 years. He has always been there for us. And now the king wants him to choose which one of us dies." A tear fell down her cheek. "I cannot let him make that choice. It would destroy him. I would rather die than see him break." The old woman took his hand. "You love him very much." "He is my family. My sister and him, they are everything I have." Wiped her eyes. "I hope he knows that whatever happens I am grateful for every day, for every moment." In his cell, Ho was still thinking. General Myra's words echoed in his mind. The king thought love was weakness. He wanted to use their hearts against them. But what if Ho could use his heart as a weapon instead? He remembered the old stories from Earth. Stories about ancient warriors. Stories about honor and combat. Stories about kings and challenges. They were an old civilization. They had traditions, customs, laws. Some of those laws might be very old, so old that even the king could not break them. Ho closed his eyes. He went through everything he had learned about them in his years of fighting them, their battle tactics, their command structure, their beliefs. Then he remembered something, a story from his first year of service. A commander had been challenged to single combat by a human captain. The captain lost and died, but they had to accept the challenge. It was their law. Single combat, a fight between two warriors, a matter of honor. What if Ho challenged the king himself? It was a crazy idea. The king was stronger, faster, more experienced. Ho would probably die within minutes. But if he won, maybe he could save both sisters. And if he lost, he would die with honor instead of breaking under the weight of an impossible choice. He opened his eyes. The darkness of the cell felt different now, less heavy, less hopeless. He had a plan, a desperate, foolish plan, but for the first time since his capture he had hope. The words of his mother came back to him, not his birth mother but Mrs. Park, the woman who had taken him in, the woman who had given him a family. Family is not about blood, she had said on her deathbed. It is about who you are willing to bleed for. Ho looked at his bloody hands. He smiled. I am willing to bleed, he whispered to the darkness. I am willing to bleed for them, and I will not stop until my heart is empty. The hours continued to pass. The moment of choice was coming, but Ho was ready. He would not choose a sister. He would choose to fight. The guards came for him when the cycle ended. 2 soldiers pulled him from the floor and dragged him through the halls. Ho did not fight. He saved his strength. He would need it soon. The throne room was full when they arrived. Every noble on the ship had come to watch. They stood in rows along the walls, dressed in fine clothes and cold smiles. This was the most exciting thing that had happened in a long time. A human would break today. They wanted to see it. King sat on his throne like always. His silver blade rested across his knees. His dark eyes followed Ho as the guards threw him to the floor. Then the side doors opened, and men were brought in. Ho's heart clenched when he saw them, walked with her head high but her face was pale. Eyes were red from crying. Chains bound their hands in front of them. The guards forced the sisters to their knees on either side of Ho. For one moment, the 3 of them were together again. Looked at him. Her eyes asked a question she could not speak out loud. What are you going to do? Reached out and touched his arm. Her hand was cold and shaking. Ho gave them both a small nod. Trust me. King stood from his throne. The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The time has come, human, the king said. He walked down the steps slowly, his blade gleaming in the cold light. You have had many hours to think. Now you must decide. He stopped in front of Ho. His shadow fell over all 3 humans like a dark blanket. Which one will you save, the older sister, he pointed his blade at, or the younger one? The blade moved too. Closed her eyes, held her breath. Ho stood up. The guards moved forward, but the king raised his hand to stop them. He looked amused. You wish to stand for your final choice. Very well, speak. Ho felt his heart beating fast. His body was still weak and hurt from the battles and the cell, but his voice was steady when he spoke. I will not choose. The crowd murmured. The king's smile grew wider. Then they both die. I warned you of this. I am not finished. Ho took a step forward. The guards tensed, but the king was curious enough to let him continue. I know the old laws of the empire. I know about the right of challenge. The murmuring stopped. Complete silence filled the room. King's smile faded a little. What do you know of our laws, human? I know that any warrior can challenge another to single combat. It is a matter of honor. The challenged must accept or they lose their standing in society. Ho's voice grew stronger. I know that this law applies to everyone, even kings. Now the crowd was whispering loudly. Some nobles looked shocked, others looked angry, a few looked excited. The king studied Ho with new eyes. You have done your research, but you are not our laws do not apply to you. The law says any warrior, it does not say any warrior. Ho pointed at himself. I am a soldier. I have fought in battles. I have killed in combat. By your own standards, I am a warrior. He stepped forward again, until he was close enough to see his own reflection in the king's dark eyes. I challenge you, king of the empire, single combat. If you win, you can kill all three of us however you like, but if I win, my sisters go free." The room exploded with noise. Nobles shouted and argued. Guards looked at each other in confusion. This had never happened before. A human challenging the king. It was madness. But it was also legal. General Myra stood at the edge of the room. Her face showed nothing, but her eyes were sharp. She watched the king, waiting to see what he would do. Raised his hand and silence returned. He looked at Ho for a long moment. Then slowly he began to laugh. "You think you can beat me? Look at yourself. You can barely stand. Your hands are broken, your body is wounded. I have fought for centuries. I have killed thousands." "Then it should be an easy victory for you," Ho said, "unless you are afraid." The king's laughter stopped. His eyes turned cold as winter. "Afraid of a human. If you refuse the challenge, that is what your people will think, that their great king was afraid of one wounded, weaponless human." Ho looked around at the watching nobles. "What will that do to your standing, I wonder?" The silence in the room was heavy. Every eye was on the king. Ho could see the thoughts moving behind his face. The king was trapped. If he refused, he would look weak. If he accepted, he would have to follow the rules of the old law. And the old law said that the prize of victory must be honored. His jaw tightened. Then he smiled again, but this time it was a cold smile, a dangerous smile. "Very well, human, I accept your challenge." He threw his blade to a guard and spread his arms wide. "Prepare the combat circle. Find a weapon for this fool. Let all see what happens to those who dare challenge the crown." The nobles cheered. Guards rushed to obey. In the center of the room, servants began to draw a large circle on the stone floor. Grabbed Ho's arm. "Are you crazy? He will kill you in seconds." "Maybe," Ho said, "but at least I did not have to choose." Was crying again, but she was also smiling. "You stupid, wonderful man. You did not have to do this." "Yes, I did." Ho took her hand. "Mrs. Park asked me to protect you, both of you. I will not break that promise. Not today, not ever." A guard brought Ho a weapon. It was a simple sword, shorter and lighter than the king's blade. It felt wrong in his wounded hands, but it would have to do. The combat circle was ready. It was about 30 feet wide, drawn in white paint on the black stone. Inside the circle, anything was allowed. Outside the circle, the fight was over. King stepped into the circle. A servant brought him his silver blade. He swung it through the air a few times, and it sang like a living thing. Ho walked to the other side of the circle. His body hurt with every step. His hands burned when he gripped the sword, but he did not let any of it show on his face. And were taken to the edge of the circle where they could watch. Guards held them in place, but they did not try to run. They could only watch and pray. General Myra moved closer to the circle. Her hand rested on her own weapon. Her face was still impossible to read. The king looked at Ho across the white line. "Any last words, human?" Ho raised his sword. It shook a little in his weak hands, but his voice did not shake at all. "I already made my choice," he said. "I chose both." The king's smile vanished. Something flickered in his eyes, respect, anger, maybe both. "Then let us see if your choice was worth dying for." He attacked. The battle had begun. The king moved like lightning. One moment he was across the circle. The next moment his blade was swinging toward Ho's head. Ho barely raised his sword in time. The blades met with a sound like thunder. The force of the blow knocked Ho backward. His feet slid on the smooth stone. His arms screamed in pain. Did not stop. He attacked again and again. Each swing was faster than the last. Each hit was stronger than the last. Ho could only block and retreat, block and retreat. The nobles cheered with every blow. Within 30 seconds, Ho had a deep cut on his left arm. Within a minute, he had another on his leg. Blood began to pool at his feet. His breathing was fast and ragged. The king was not even trying. He was playing with Ho. the way a cat plays with a mouse. "Is this the great human warrior?" called out to the crowd. "Is this the man who dared challenge a king?" The nobles laughed. They threw insults at Ho. They called him names in their alien language. But Ho did not listen to them. He watched the king. He studied his movements. He looked for patterns. Every fighter had patterns. Every warrior had habits. Ho had learned this in his years of combat. The trick was staying alive long enough to find them. Swung low, Ho jumped back. Swung high, Ho ducked. Stabbed forward, Ho twisted to the side. There he saw it. Every time the king made a big swing, he lifted his left elbow a little too high. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but it created a tiny opening for just a moment. Ho stored this information in his mind. He was not ready to use it yet. He needed the king to get comfortable. He needed the king to think he had already won. The fight continued. Ho took more cuts. His blood stained the white circle red. His body grew weaker with every passing minute, but he kept standing, he kept blocking, he kept moving. The crowd grew quieter, the laughter faded. Something was wrong. The human should have fallen by now. The human should have begged for mercy, but he did not fall, he did not beg. He just kept standing. King's face changed. The amusement was gone. Now there was frustration. He increased his speed, his power. He hammered at Ho with everything he had. Ho fell to one knee. His sword flew from his hands. The crowd held its breath. Pointed his blade at Ho's throat. "This is over, human. Bow before me and beg for death. It is the only mercy you will receive." Ho looked up at the king. Blood ran down his face. His body was broken and torn, but he smiled. "My mother taught me something when I was young," he said. His voice was rough but clear. "She said a human does not kneel to anyone, not even death." He grabbed the king's blade with his bare hand. The edge cut deep into his palm, but he held on tight. Then he swung his body forward and slammed his head into the king's face. The skull was harder than a human skull, but Ho did not care. The blow knocked backward. For one moment the king lost his balance. Ho rolled across the ground and grabbed his fallen sword. He came up swinging. His blade cut the king's arm. A thin line of dark blood appeared on the gray skin. The room went absolutely silent. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Every eye stared at the wound on the king's arm. Blood, royal blood, staining his fine clothes. No one had made King bleed in living memory. Ho stood in the center of the circle, swaying on his feet. He raised his sword again. "What is wrong, your majesty? I thought you said this would be easy." Looked at his own blood, his face twisted with rage. You actually cut me." "I did more than cut you, I made you bleed." Ho spat blood onto the ground. "And I am still standing." The king's eyes burned with hatred. All pretense of playing was gone now. He attacked with deadly purpose, putting all his strength into every swing. Ho met him head-on. The next few minutes were the most intense of Ho's life. He used every trick he had ever learned, feints and fakes, misdirection and movement. He aimed for weak points that he had noticed during the fight. He ducked and rolled and spun. But it was not enough. Was too strong, too fast, too experienced. Ho was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His vision was starting to blur. His legs were giving out. He fell again. This time he could not get up. His sword lay just out of reach. His strength was gone. The king stood over him, chest heaving. Dark blood dripped from his arm where Ho had cut him. His eyes were wild with fury. "Why?" demanded. "Why do you keep fighting? You cannot win. You never could win. Every moment you spend on this floor brings you closer to death. Why do you not surrender?" Ho tried to speak. Blood filled his mouth. He spat it out and tried again. "Because where I come from, we do not measure victory by survival." He looked past the king, at and watching from the edge of the circle. "We measure it by what we are willing to lose." He reached out his hand toward his sisters. They were crying. They were screaming his name, but they were alive. I would lose everything for them, Ho whispered. My blood, my life, my soul, that is what love means, and you will never understand that. You will never be able to break that. The king stared at him. For one moment, something almost like doubt crossed his ancient face. Then he raised his blade for the killing blow. Alarms screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed. The floor shook with a massive impact. Guards rushed to the windows and shouted in confusion. General Myra's voice cut through the chaos. My king, we are under attack, human ships. Spun around. Through the great windows of the throne room he could see them. A dozen human vessels, small and battered, firing everything they had at the flagship. At the front of the fleet was a ship Ho recognized. It was the escape transport from station. Commander had made it out, and he had come back. Speaking, Ho understood now. She had sent a signal, she had called for help, and the humans had come. The king roared with rage. Destroy them all. But in the confusion, the guards let go of and the sisters ran into the combat circle. They reached Ho and pulled him up between them. We have you, said. We have you, Ho, hold on. I told you, cried. I told you he would come for us. I never lost faith. Ho could barely see, but he could feel their arms around him. He could hear their voices, and that was enough. We need to run, he managed to say. We need to get to a shuttle. The chaos around them grew. Explosions rocked the ship. Soldiers ran in every direction. And in the center of the throne room, a wounded king screamed for order. The three humans had one chance, and they were going to take it. The throne room had become a storm of panic and fire. Soldiers shouted orders that no one could hear. Explosions shook the walls. The great windows cracked as human weapons struck the hull outside. And half carried Ho through the chaos. He was barely conscious. His blood left a trail on the floor behind them, but he forced his legs to keep moving. One step, another step, again. The shuttle bay said, It is 3 floors down if we can reach it. A guard spotted them. He raised his weapon and aimed its head. A shot rang out, the guard fell. General Myra stepped out of the smoke. She held a gun in her hand. Her face was hard and determined. Go left, she said. The main corridors are blocked. Use the service tunnels, I will show you. Stared at her, why are you helping us? Myra did not answer right away. She looked at Ho, at his broken body and his bloody face. Then she looked at the 2 sisters who refused to let him fall. I have served King for 50 years, she said. I have seen him break 1,000 species, but I have never seen anyone like you. You fight when you cannot win. You love when love brings only pain. She shook her head slowly. Perhaps I have been on the wrong side of this war. She turned and started walking. Follow me quickly. They moved through the ship like shadows. Myra led them through narrow tunnels and forgotten passages. Twice, they had to hide as soldiers ran past. Once, they had to wait while a fire burned itself out ahead. Ho drifted in and out of awareness. Sometimes he saw the walls of the ship. Sometimes he saw memories, his mother's face, the streets of New, as a little girl holding his hand. He felt's arm around his waist, strong and steady. He heard's voice in his ear telling him to stay awake. He held onto those sounds, those feelings. They were all that kept him alive. Finally, they reached the shuttle bay. It was a large room filled with small ships. Most were military shuttles, but a few were captured human vessels. Myra pointed to one at the far end. That transport came from your station. It still has human controls. Can you fly it? I can fly anything, said. Get us there. They were halfway across the bay when the doors behind them exploded open. King walked through the smoke. His armor was dented from the battle. His arms still bled from Ho's cut. His eyes burned with a rage that seemed to light the air around him. You think you can escape, he roared. You think you can embarrass me in front of my court and then just run. He raised his blade and pointed it at them. General Myra, step away from the humans, now. Myra did not move. I said step away. The general slowly turned to face her king. No. The word hung in the air like thunder. Every soldier in the bay stared in shock. His face twisted. You dare to defy me, you, my most trusted commander. I have been trusted to do terrible things. Myra's voice was calm. I have conquered worlds. I have crushed rebellions. I have done everything you asked without question. But today I watched a human challenge a king to save his family. I watched him fight until his body broke. I watched him refuse to give up, even when there was no hope. She looked at Ho, then back at the king. And I asked myself, what do we have that is worth fighting for like that? What do we love enough to bleed for? The answer is nothing. We have power, we have conquest, but we have nothing that matters. She raised her weapon and pointed it at the king. I am done serving nothing. The soldiers around her hesitated. They were trained to follow orders, but Myra was their general. They did not know what to do. Laughed, but it was a cold, empty sound. You think you can stop me? You think one traitor can change anything? Maybe not, Myra looked at the sisters, but I can buy them time. Go now. And ran. They dragged Ho to the transport ship, threw open the door and pushed inside, then turned to pull Ho up the ramp. Behind them, Myra and the king began to fight. The sounds of battle echoed through the bay. Metal struck metal, energy weapons fired, soldiers shouted and screamed. Did not look back. She dumped Ho onto a seat and ran to the pilot's controls. Her hands flew over the switches. The ship rumbled to life. Hold on, she shouted. The transport shot forward. It blasted through the bay doors and into the cold darkness of space. Outside, the battle raged. The human fleet was small but they fought like demons. Missiles and laser fire lit up the void. Warships turned to engage, but the humans were too fast, too desperate. Flew the transport like she was possessed. She twisted and rolled through the chaos, dodging fire from both sides, held onto Ho and prayed. A fighter locked onto them. Warning alarms screamed. Then a human ship swooped in from above and blasted the fighter to pieces. Commander's voice crackled over the radio. Transport vessel, this is Commander. Get to these coordinates. We will cover you. Almost cried with relief. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. They flew through the battle. Human ships surrounded them, forming a protective wall. One by one, the small fleet began to retreat, jumping to faster-than-light speed as soon as they reached safe distance. The last thing saw through the window was the flagship. It was damaged and burning in several places, and standing at one of the cracked windows was a figure in gray armor, watching them go. General Myra, she was still alive. Then space twisted, stars stretched, and the transport jumped away. They came out of the jump near a distant moon. The rest of the human fleet was already there, gathering together like a flock of wounded birds. There were about 100 survivors from station, scattered across a dozen ships. Worked on Ho's wounds. She had no proper medical supplies, only what she could find on the transport, but she worked with everything she had. She stitched his cuts with thread from her clothes. She bandaged his wounds with strips of fabric. She talked to him the whole time, telling him to stay awake, telling him he was safe now, telling him she loved him. Sat beside them after she finished her flight. She held Ho's hand and did not let go. You stupid, brave, wonderful idiot, she whispered. You could have died, you almost died. Ho opened his eyes a little. His lips moved, trying to form words. Worth it, he managed to say. You are both worth it. His tears fell onto his hand. Hugged him gently, careful of his injuries. Outside the window, the stars shone like diamonds against the black. They were far from space now, far from the king and his throne, far from the game that was meant to break them. They had escaped, all three of them together. And somewhere in the darkness, a message began to spread. A story about a human who challenged a king. A human who made the king bleed. A human who fought for love instead of power. The story was just beginning, and the universe was about to hear it. 2 weeks had passed since the escape from the flagship. The human fleet found shelter in a hidden base on a small planet at the edge of known space. It was a cold world, covered in ice and stone, but it was safe. They would not find them here. Ho lay in the medical bay for 10 of those days. His wounds were deep and serious. More than once the doctors said he might not make it, but refused to leave his side. She changed his bandages, gave him medicine, and talked to him even when he could not answer. Worked with the other engineers to repair the damaged ships. They had limited supplies and broken tools, but they found ways. That was what humans did. They found ways. On the 11th day, Ho opened his eyes. Was asleep in a chair beside his bed. Her hand was wrapped around his. When she felt him move, she woke up instantly. Ho, her voice was rough from exhaustion. Can you hear me? He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Grabbed a cup of water and helped him drink. The cold liquid felt like heaven. Where are we? He managed to ask. Somewhere safe. His eyes filled with tears. You almost died. You lost so much blood. The doctors said it was a miracle you survived. I had a good reason to survive. He squeezed her hand weakly. Where is? I am here, appeared at the door. She had dark circles under her eyes and grease on her clothes, but she was smiling. You finally decided to wake up. I was tired. Walked to his bed and sat on the other side. Now both sisters were there, one on each side. Just like before, just like always. You scared us, said. When you challenged the king, when you started to fight, I thought I was going to watch you die. I thought I was going to die too, Ho admitted. But I could not choose. You understand, right? I could never choose between you. We know, wiped her eyes. We always knew. Leaned down and kissed his forehead. Rest now. You need to heal. We will be here when you wake up. Ho closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he slept without nightmares. The days passed slowly on the ice planet. The survivors of Station slowly rebuilt their lives. They made shelters. They rationed food. They told stories around small fires to keep their spirits up. And they told one story more than any other, the story of Ho and the king. It spread through the camp like wildfire. Parents told it to their children. Soldiers shared it in their bunks. Engineers wrote it down so it would never be forgotten. A human challenged the king. A human made him bleed. A human refused to break. The story gave people hope. It reminded them that they were not helpless, that their enemies could be hurt, that love was not a weakness but a weapon. Commander visited Ho one evening. The old soldier sat beside his bed and said nothing for a long time. He just looked at the young man he had trained and fought beside. Finally he spoke. What you did was the bravest thing I have ever seen, and the... Ho smiled a little. I know. The people look up to you now. They see you as a symbol, a sign that we can fight back. Paused. I need you to get better, Ho, not just for yourself, for all of us. I will try, Commander. Nodded and stood to leave. At the door he stopped. Your mother would be proud, both of them. Then he was gone, and Ho was alone with his thoughts. A month after the escape, a message arrived at the hidden base. It was coded and encrypted, sent through channels that should have been impossible to trace. Was the one who decoded it. When she saw the contents, she ran to find Ho. He was walking now, slowly and with help. His wounds were healing, but they would leave scars. Walked beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. Showed them the message. It was from General Myra. The message said that she had survived her fight with the king. She was wounded, but alive. After the battle, had named her a traitor and ordered her execution. But many of her soldiers had refused to obey. They believed in her more than they believed in the king. Myra had escaped with a small fleet of who shared her doubts. They wanted to defect. They wanted to fight against the empire they once served. They wanted to help humanity. The message ended with a simple request. She wanted to meet. She wanted to work together. She believed that what she had seen on that ship, the love, the sacrifice, the refusal to break, was the key to defeating the Empire. If humans and worked together, maybe they could build something better. Ho read the message 3 times, then he looked at his sisters. "What do you think?" Crossed her arms. "It could be a trap." "It could," Ho agreed. "But I looked into her eyes on that ship. She was not lying. She really does want something different." Spoke softly. "She saved our lives. She stood against her own king to help us escape. I think we should trust her." Commander was called. The survivors debated. In the end, they decided to take the risk. They would meet General Myra. They would hear what she had to say. Hope was worth the risk. The night before the meeting, Ho stood at a window in the medical bay. The ice planet had no stars. The sky was always gray with clouds, but sometimes, through gaps in the weather, the stars would appear. Tonight was one of those nights. And found him there. They stood on either side of him, just as they had done so many times before. 3 survivors of a battle they should not have won. 3 children of a woman who taught them the meaning of family. "The king wanted you to choose," said softly. "He thought love was a weakness," added. "He thought he could use it against you." Ho nodded. He was wrong. They looked at the stars together. Somewhere out there, the Empire was preparing for war. Somewhere out there, King was planning his revenge. The future was uncertain and dangerous. But they were not afraid. "Mother used to say something," said. "I think about it every day now." "Family is not about blood," continued. Ho finished the words. "It is about who you are willing to bleed for." He put his arms around his sisters. They leaned into him, careful of his wounds. "They wanted me to choose," Ho said quietly. "They will never understand. We do not choose who to save. We fight until we save everyone or die trying." Nodded. "That is what makes us human." Behind them, through the windows of the base, 100 survivors moved and worked and lived. They were refugees. They were soldiers. They were engineers and doctors and children. They were the last hope of a species that refused to give up. And in the darkness of space, a story was spreading. A story about a human who faced an impossible choice. A story about a man who would not break. A story about the power of love in a universe that tried to destroy it. The story was not finished yet. There would be more battles, more struggles, more sacrifices. The war was far from over. But for now, on this small planet of ice and stone, 3 humans stood together and looked at the stars. They were family, they were survivors. And they were just getting started.